It's not because we're geniuses. It's because we've been in the national spotlight for 2 decades or more, right? And when everybody's looking over your shoulder, you have to up your game.
Welcome to 1850 Main Street. Come on in and pull up a chair.
Today, Rob Walgate and Alan C. Duncan are joined in studio by Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose.
All right, we're joined in studio today by Ohio Secretary of State, Mr. Frank LaRose. Mr. Secretary, thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Well, I mean, we've come through an election season. Have we gotten any sleep down at the Secretary's office? I mean, I know that you have an amazing staff.
Yeah.
And your staff and what you do in Ohio, you know, selfishly, we think should be a template for what many other states do across this country.
Well, I agree, and I think others do as well. The RNC chair had me traveling the country to other states, sort of preaching the gospel of how you could make it both easy to vote and hard to cheat, as we do. Even folks like the U.S. Department of Homeland Security look to Ohio as an example and encourage other states to follow that. But election season is for us many, many months of work. People have this sort of very individualized experience where they go to vote at their precinct, at their local high school gym or church rec hall or whatever else. And then they see the results scroll on their screen that night. They think it's this, it's magic. It just sort of happens in the background. Well, we've kind of made it look easy in Ohio, but it is months and months of work. The prep work leading up to it, making sure that we've thought of all the contingencies, making sure that we're ready to work through those. So none of the issues that come up on Election Day become a showstopper. And things do come up on Election Day.
Well, we were talking about that before we stepped in the studio. Some of the things that happened in Ohio on Election Day this year that people would never thought could happen or would happen.
Yeah, and every election, hundreds of things do happen. We had power outages, dozens of them. And guess what? We were able to work with the power companies to
It wasn't a conspiracy.
No.
They were actual power outages.
Public safety first, so they're going to get the hospitals plugged back in. But the next thing is they were getting those polling locations back up and running. In most cases, the outages were less than an hour. We also had violent incidents occur that happened. We were able to work through. We had a shooting near a polling location. Law enforcement response was coordinated through our office. We tragically had a suicide occur. We worked through that. We had a bomb threat in Cincinnati. Again, 250, 300 different things that come up on Election Day. But what we've set up, and this is my military background, would look like what you would think of as an emergency operations center. We've got that triage of information coming in. We can sort of quickly prioritize what requires our attention first and foremost. We can put the right team of experts on it. And the message is none of those things become a showstopper so that we can continue running Election Day. We can close the polls right on time at 7:30 and then give you those results on Election Night. But the work continues after that. We do the provisional ballots. We do the overseas and military ballots that come in, and we've worked through those. We just completed what's called the post-election audit. Yes, this is where we count the hard copy, dead tree, wet ink paper and compare it to the electronic result. That has just concluded at all 88 of our county boards of elections. And tomorrow, actually, we're going to be conducting the Electoral College, which is, of course, when Ohio's 17 electoral votes are cast. And we send those certified copies to the U.S. Archives, National Archives, to the Clerk of Congress, to the 6th Federal Court District, and we retain a copy in Ohio. All that is part of the process, and really only after that Electoral College is done do we kind of consider the 2024 election in the books.
Well, and Ohio is no small state. I mean, 88 counties.
Yeah.
We have 8.2 million registered voters. Am I close?
There you are, right on. Yeah.
In that neighborhood. So it isn't like, and again, this isn't to bash other states or say they should do it like this, but I think in Ohio and Florida and a few others, the template's been set where you say, hey, everyone can vote and the votes can be tabulated and counted, and we can know things maybe even before some go to bed on election night.
You're right on it that the two states that are viewed as the national model are Ohio and Florida. And it's kind of intuitive why. It's not because we're geniuses. It's because we've been in the national spotlight for 2 decades or more, right? Yeah. And when everybody's looking over your shoulder, you have to up your game. And because of the scrutiny that Ohio and Florida have been under for decades, we've passed good laws. We've gone into court to fight bad ones. We have put good administration in place. I mean, listen, there was a time a few decades ago where the Board of Elections was the place that somebody would go find a job if they were the local judge's idiot little brother that couldn't find something else to do. Sorry to say, but it's not that way anymore. Right. These are professional elections administrators They have background check requirements that are strictly enforced, continuing education requirements. These are people that are very good at what they do. Ohio runs good elections, and we truly are the example for the rest of the country.
Well, let me ask this, because some would say, well, in Ohio and Florida, they don't want everyone to vote. They only want certain people to vote. Yeah, I mean, we've heard that. I don't believe it, but those are the things that are thrown out there from others.
So let's take a step even back from that. You'll hear harsh partisan voices really on both sides that present this false choice where you have to choose either security or convenience. I reject that. You don't have to pick one or the other. You can have easy to vote and hard to cheat simultaneously. And we've accomplished that. It is undeniably easy to vote in Ohio. We've got 4 weeks of early voting, no fault absentee, online voter registration, thousands of polling locations open from 6:30 to 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. We make it easy to vote in Ohio, but we also make it hard to cheat. We take dead people off the voter rolls. Don't apologize for doing that. When we find people on rare occasions committing election-related crimes, we refer them to county prosecutors, and then we hound the county prosecutors to make sure they're actually following through on these. So yes, we make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. We've removed over 700 non-citizens from the voter rolls this year. Now, 700 out of 8.2 million is a small number, but it's a non-zero number, and we're not going to just turn our head and allow that kind of thing to happen. Right. So we make it easy to vote and hard to cheat, but you're right. The left in particular has this line where they say, as the Republican who holds the office of Secretary of State, that I am trying to suppress the vote. Rob, if that was my objective, I am demonstrably terrible at it. We have had record-breaking turnout during my time in this office. 2020 was the all-time record-breaking election. 2018 was a high turnout election. 2022 broke the record for gubernatorial elections. And this year in 2024, we broke the all-time record for early voting. And here's the clincher. Republicans outpaced Democrats in early voting this year. A lot of people miss that. In the old days, the GOP would have felt pretty good if we went into Election Day only behind by a couple 100,000. This year, we went into Election Day ahead. Right. We didn't know how people voted, but we knew that Republicans had voted in higher numbers than Democrats. Early voting broke the all-time record with massive Republican participation, and the overall 5.8 million people voting in this election was very close to that all-time record. So yeah, we've had high turnout in Ohio and a trustworthy election. And then the voters chose. And when you say we, you are Republican. Yes. We come at this from an independent perspective, as everyone knows. But you as a Republican, though, and I think I know you well enough to say there's been times you've maybe frustrated both political parties, because I believe you take your role as Secretary of State as serving all over 11 million Ohioans, not just the ones with the R's next to the name. I wear the referee's jersey, and I come down on the side of the law, right, first and foremost, when it comes to breaking tie votes. A lot of people don't realize this. We're very decentralized in Ohio, and we believe in local control of things, right? So the county board of elections is run by 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans from your county. And yes, it seems like Republicans and Democrats can't agree what day of the week it is, but at your county board of elections, it's a completely bipartisan enterprise. Occasionally, they tie on those votes. So I am sort of the 5th vote on every county board of elections. If you look at my record of breaking tie votes, I've sided with the Republicans, I've sided with the Democrats, but I really haven't sided with either party. I've done what the law requires when it comes to the administration of elections. And here's the thing, if we don't like what the law says, we don't get to just change it. I mean, we don't get to just say what we work with the legislature so that they can revise the Ohio Revised Code and improve it over time.
Thanks for stopping by at 1850 Main Street. We're glad you're here. Do you want to learn more about what is really going on behind the scenes in public policy? Tune in to The Public Square on over 200 radio stations coast to coast. Or download the free Public Square mobile app from your app store. Just look for The Lamppost. Find out what America is really talking about at thepublicsquare.com.
Well, you've talked about your military experience in this discussion. So I guess if we rewind the tape to the early 2000s, did you envision yourself being a secretary, being a politician, sitting in this? No. I know some of the places that your military experience has taken you around the world.
In fact, 2000 in particular, I was serving in Kosovo as part of the NATO peacekeeping operations. I was that guy who, as a 20-year-old, I was not old enough to drink legally yet, but I was a Army sergeant, so I was leading men and women in combat. I was voting from Kosovo, or attempting to, but I waited until October to request my absentee ballot. It arrived in Kosovo sometime in late November, long past the deadline. It rattled around in the back of somebody's Humvee.
Did you say it was 2000?
2000.
It wasn't like that was a big election.
Yeah, well, right. But I didn't. So here was that inspiration, though. When I got to the state legislature, I worked to modernize UOCAVA voting, which is overseas and military voting, to streamline that process. Now Ohio's really the best in the country when it comes to getting ballots to our men and women serving abroad. And that's what put me on this path of working on election law that eventually led to me serving as Secretary of State. I enlisted in the Army when I was 18. Grew up in Copley, Ohio, not far from here. My Boy Scout leader was a World War II veteran. And this guy he knew French, so they made him part of the OSS. If you understand your World War II history, that's a precursor to both the CIA and the Special Operations Command. And then he became part of the Normandy invasion because they needed him to put his uniform back on after working with the French resistance and to be part of that.
That's a heck of a Boy Scout leader.
Liberated a concentration camp. Those were the stories I heard at 16, 15 years old at Camp Manitowoc. And I remember Bill Miller, my hero, he looked me in the eyes. He was in his mid-70s. He said, "Frankie, people will tell you the Holocaust never happened. I want to tell you what I saw with my own eyes." So I knew from an early age what I wanted to do. My parents fought me on it, but I was either stubborn or resolute as a teenager, whichever one you prefer. And I fulfilled my dream of enlisting in the Army at 18, and I thought I'd be a lifer. I thought I'd stick with it. Fact is, around 28 years old, I decided after 10 years on active duty, I'd gotten a great education in the Army. It was time for a formal education. I didn't want to go much longer without that. So I went to Ohio State, earned a business degree, and then decided to run for office.
Well, here you are today, and Ohioans are thankful for that, especially because of the election, but we're very thankful for your service, obviously, as well. One of the things we talked about is you mentioned how many times you've been to Israel.
Yeah.
I believe 5 times?
5 times.
And you did some training over there.
Yeah, so I trained with the IDF actually here at Fort Bragg. They would send rotations of folks to train with us, and we would send folks to train with them. And so I got to train with members of the IDF. I can tell you that as a Green Beret on a Special Forces team, we do a lot of what we call joint training, where we are training with allies. But really what it often is we're the ones doing the training and they're the ones doing the learning. And this is just because of how sophisticated the U.S. Special Operations Command is. But with the IDF, the shoe's on the other foot. We're going to sit here and watch the way you guys do this because they've unfortunately had to have a lot of experience when it comes to counterterrorism, low-intensity conflict, urban warfare, tunnel warfare. I mean, the stuff that these guys have had to do, guys and gals, by the way, the Israelis have had a long history of females in the military, but the stuff that they've done has been very good. And so I've had the opportunity to travel to Israel 5 times. I love it there. It's one of the few places. I'm a curious traveler. I want to go to someplace new. I'll go back to Israel every chance I get, and I love it.
Yeah. Well, you're speaking our language here. We want to go as a staff. That's our plan. That we hope to maybe go do it. I'm angling. We do a Christmas in America celebration every year, and I'm hoping to do a Christmas in America and film some stuff there. That's my dream.
Well, and as you know, Bethlehem is a Palestinian area, but it's permissive and easy to travel in, and I think you'd find it a rewarding experience. Call me before you do, because I've got a lot of great friends in Israel, including people that serve in the Israeli government that would love to host a group of Americans like you coming over.
That would be amazing.
We look forward to it. Back to elections a little bit, because I think the one great thing about the United States, right, is we're 50 unique states. Yes. And each state holds their own unique election, voting for the same things in some instances. But, or people, for instance, of the President of the United States, but members of Congress, members of the U.S. Senate. Are there things from a federal perspective, as the chief elections officer from a state, that you say, boy, I wish every state did this, or boy, I wish we didn't do that?
Yeah, well, I am a 10th Amendment federalist. I believe in the states retaining control of things like this. We do not want to nationalize our elections, although I've done foreign election observation in a lot of countries, and what we have is rare. In most countries, there is a central elections commission, a national elections commission. Yeah. Thankfully, we don't have that. What the role for the federal government is to encourage best practices, I believe, and not to try to federalize the administration of elections. I've testified in front of Congress several times. There's a bill called the SAVE Act that Speaker Johnson supports, President-elect Trump supports, And that would streamline the process for the federal government providing citizenship data to states. Right now, it's enormously hard. In fact, I've filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration, which is still pending, and we're going to continue pursuing it. May get a chance to work with the Trump administration on settling that lawsuit. I hope we do, because there are 4 federal databases for citizenship data. Typical federal government, they can't put it all in one place. 4 databases, they only allow us access to one of those. So I have an incomplete picture for who is a citizen and who is not in my state. With that, I've been able to find over 700 on the rolls in Ohio and remove them, but there are more. And so that's a thing that the federal government should do. There's a thing called the ACE Act, which is American Confidence in Elections, that I've worked with the House admin chair to help write, that would take some of the best practices from states like Ohio so that we can spread those to other states and incentivize those states to do it. If you're going to receive HAVA funding, for example, Help America Vote Act, if the federal taxpayer is going to help you with funding your elections, maybe we should tie some things to that, like having your results done on election night, like removing dead people from the voter rolls, even having bipartisan administration of your elections. We have that in Ohio, and we take that for granted. Not every state has bipartisan oversight of their elections.
I think that's one of the things as a voter in the state of Ohio that always leaves me scratching my head when I hear people complain. They use the word purge, right? Well, the voter rolls have been purged.
Yes.
I view it as the voter rolls have been cleaned from people who, A, haven't been active for a number of years, and you probably don't know where they live anymore, or B, have passed away. I mean, think of all the mail that you receive at your house from people that have moved, right? You probably hear that all the time in other states where ballots are sent, because in some states they don't ask for if you want an absentee ballot. Is that true? Some states just mail ballots.
Yes, and in fact, I have been sued multiple times by leftist groups to try to force us to mail ballots unsolicited to people. We have gone into court and fought and won successfully to keep that from happening in Ohio. We would never send out unsolicited absentee ballots. But you're right, the left is very good at branding. They know words, right? And this word purge, even, if you think of the history of this, that's the word that was used during the Russian Revolution, when you took non-compliant peasants out in the countryside and executed them summarily. That was called a purge. There's a horror movie called The Purge, right? So it's got this very ominous sound. Listen, we're removing what I call the 3 Ds: deceased, departed, and duplicate. I use that alliteration intentionally. Deceased is self-evident. Departed, meaning they've moved out of the jurisdiction, and duplicate, there are human errors involved. My name is Frank LaRose Jr. When I moved from Akron to Columbus, if I registered down there without the junior, it would potentially create a duplicate. That needs to be resolved over time. And so, yes, when the left accuses me of purging voter rolls, I'll proudly tell you, yes, we're removing bad data. We're not removing voters.
So you use the example of moving from the Akron area to Columbus. Let's use the example of, you talked about being a college student at Ohio State. Let's use the example of a Pennsylvania resident that goes to Ohio State, and they register to vote in Ohio. Are we talking with Pennsylvania? I say we as in Ohio. Are we talking with them, or are we talking with all the other 49 states to make sure there aren't duplicates in that area?
So to some extent, yes. And but not in every state. We work with the National Change of Address database that the U.S. Postal Service operates. Not perfect, because not everybody fills out that card or goes on the website and does that. We have relationships that we've built with other states, but not every state. There was an effort at one point that I think started off well-intentioned, but like a lot of things, it was captured by leftists, called ERIC, Election Registration Information Center. It was a group of states that created this co-op for data exchange. The problem is that there are a group of sort of powerful interests on the left that had co-opted it. And so I pulled Ohio out of it, and so did Texas, and so did Florida, and a bunch of other Republican states, because it was not living up to its founding purpose. So what we've replaced that with is memorandums of understanding one-on-one with states, so we can exchange data. And we're in the process of doing that right now following the election, most of which is a public record already. So I check, it's a binary fact whether you voted or not in the 2024 election. 5.8 million of us did. I'm going to check my voter rolls against other states, and we've got these relationships with many states. And if the same first, middle, last date of birth all voted in Ohio and in Florida, it's not dispositive that it's the same person, but it's likely. And so if we find the same first, middle, last, and date of birth that voted in Ohio and voted in Florida, we're going to initiate an investigation. We're going to figure out if that is a multi-state voter, and we are going to refer them for prosecution because it is in fact a felony. We've done that several hundred times during the time I've been in this office, and we have secured convictions working with our AG and with our county prosecutors.
Well, and we talk about those numbers, and then you also talked about the 700 that you found were not United States citizens that were registered to vote. And some people say, oh, it's 5.8 million. The amount of elections that take place in a respective state or a respective county or community that are decided by one vote always boggles my mind. And I know there's stuff put out there to show this number of races were decided by one vote or less.
It's usually over a
flip,
dozen.
Right? Yeah. The coin flip or pulling things out of a hat, the way they decide it, like baffled. And I'm like, every vote kind of does matter.
We release a list every year, and we'll usually do it around the holidays, around the Christmas season. We will come up with the list of every race in Ohio that came down to a single vote, meaning it was a dead tie or one vote determined it, and it's usually well over a dozen.
Yeah.
And it's illustrative to people. But the other thing is this: when I was testifying in front of Congress several months ago, one of the Democrat members of the House Admin Committee said, "All right, LaRose, come clean with us here. This whole non-citizen voting thing is extremely rare, right?" And I said, "Yes, it's rare. And by God, we got to keep it that way, right?" And then another Democrat member said, "Well, it's already illegal for non-citizens to vote, so what are you even talking about?" And I said, "Well, it's already illegal to hijack an airplane, but that doesn't mean that we abolish TSA. We have to have enforcement mechanisms, and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about making it illegal. It is, of course, illegal. We're talking about having the mechanisms to enforce it so that if someone does this, and we know it happens in small numbers, but it happens, we can actually, enforce the law and make sure that people face the consequences."
This conversation isn't over yet, so come on back next time and pull up a chair at 1850 Main Street. To help spread the word, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To find out more, visit 1850mainstreet.com. We'll see you soon.